You guys ready to dive into love?
Welcome to the Manspace podcast. We're your hosts, Doctors Matt Brown and Rob Porter, and clinical therapist Mike Porter. Welcome back, spacemen. And guess who's back? It's Matt. Oh, you guys, Matt's recently acquired an affinity for energy drinks.
Yeah.
I can't eat them. Drink them.
I think when my taste comes back all the way, I won't be able to either.
Yeah, if anybody's wondering, I'm diagnosing Matt officially with long COVID.
Yeah, I was wondering about
Is that
but
a
you
thing?
got, yeah.
Oh, how did I not know about long COVID?
But it's longer than what Matt has. Matt just has COVID.
I don't think I have COVID now.
No, not now. But I did get sick, and I cannot shake this cough. It's been like 2 weeks.
You've probably had the same. Did you test?
No, because we were going to, and then Becky's like, our tests are expired. So she threw them all out. I was like, they probably would have worked fine.
My first time with COVID, guys. But like, there's literally nothing to look forward to, man. And so I started researching it, and I guess one of the most promising therapies for it is like smell training. So you buy essential oils, like we were saying, and you tell yourself what it smells like. So I can say seriously. I'm like near scented right now. Like I can smell it if it's up close. I'm tasting a little bit more, but it's still like I had some Rudy's yesterday, and I could just like faintly taste the smoke. Maybe that says more about Rudy's than my sense of smell or taste. But
I wish you would have done an experiment on seeing if you could mess with your brain and pick up the peppermint smell and be like peanut butter.
Dude, that one actually was the weirdest because I had lemon, lavender, and peppermint, and the peppermint like went in and out, and it was it yesterday or the day before? My taste and smell came like roaring back as I was eating my Nutrageous, and I could taste all the dimensions, like almost amplified. I was like, "Holy crap!" And then. And then, like, an hour later, I was like, nothing. Aww. Teaser. Maybe it's kind of like it'll just flicker on and off for a little while and then come back on.
That's so weird.
Jenner has stuff she says she still can't quite smell.
Don't tell me that, dude. You told me that last time. And
I was going to say, like, it's just kind of diminished.
Is it at least, like, undesirable stuff? Or is it stuff she wants to be
Sometimes smelling? It is. No, there's some stuff where she's like, we'll all complain that something stinks. And she's like, I can't smell it. So
nice.
It's not like she just walks around only smelling ammonia.
Right.
The one time I was pretty sure I had COVID, all I could smell, I smelled constantly afterwards ammonia. I didn't lose any scent, any smell. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Was that when Zero Sodas stopped?
That was a different time, actually.
Okay.
I don't know. Man, maybe that actually was because Zero Soda started to taste like, this makes this taste like I'm drinking ammonia.
Ammonia? That is weird, man.
Yes,
mine just like I can taste just like sweetness, but no, like I can't really pick up on any other flavors. This I'm actually tasting a little bit today. It's Cherry Starburst C4.
Which is funny because if you're drinking it and you can't,
we'll see how long this lasts because it is starting to taste a little crappy.
I was going to say, if you're drinking it and you can't taste it, it's for the caffeine. Like, that's all you can say. No, I'm drinking it for the caffeine. Oh, yeah. I can't taste it.
Well, no, I can taste this more than other things.
Oh, okay.
Like, it's registering something. But I got a Coke Zero the other day, and I was like, this just, it's gross.
Yep. Come back to the dark side and drink full.
Well, and I've had a real Coke, too, and it's the same thing. I'm like, dang it.
See,
Rob. It doesn't taste like anything.
Well, we should probably, to all spacemen, it's because we haven't seen Matt in so long because he was gone last time and we just miss him.
We do.
It was only a week, man.
I know, but it felt so long.
You guys ready to dive into love?
Yeah, the listeners don't know what the topic is yet unless they read the title.
No teaser.
I guess people could do that.
Who reads titles?
I'm going to go back to Manspace days of yore. Start us with a story.
Oh.
So, when I was in my master's program, we had the opportunity to run therapy groups. So we took a class on it, and then there were like 2 or 3 options, I think. but then we could also propose one of our own. So me and one of my cohort members wanted to do one on parenting, so we had to take this extra parenting class from Dr. Gawain Wells.
Oh,
Awesome, most awesome first name, Gawain.
Yeah.
But he wrote a book called Love, Limits, and Latitude, and so basically the way that the curriculum went was really, I would say, like the biggest portion of it was focused on love. So we read some additional books and things like that, and then got into like limit setting, and the latitude stuff was a little bit more like, as kids age and you're trying to help them make their own decisions. But it was interesting because I guess I didn't really anticipate this then. I was kind of wondering why are we spending so much time on the love part? Like, when are we going to talk about telling kids what to do? Like, I just thought, like, isn't this about like parenting? Like, are we gonna get into the parenting part of this? But and then also the parents in the group, that was like, that's what would bring them in, is like, I'm having trouble, like with my kids' behavior or things like that, right? So they all were like, okay, yeah, when are we gonna get to the limits, right? And then that's been my experience from then on. Like, just everybody kind of wanting to jump in at the limits part of things. But I guess reflecting back on that, without that love piece, like, all you have is struggle, right? Because you're just trying to set limits with somebody who knows that you hate them, basically, or you're frustrated with them. So there's this I don't know what to call these stupid things, table, quadrants, that we would use with in another program for couple communication, but it breaks down into 4 different quadrants. So I'm going to try and explain this. The upper left quadrant is somebody who is uncaring and has no skill, like no communication skill,
right.
and that leads to abuse, which is, I guess that makes, I don't know, it sounded a little strong the first time I read it, but yeah, if I don't care about you and I have no communication skills, then probably my behavior will be abusive to you. The
Right.
bottom left quadrant is caring but still no skill, so that leads to misunderstanding. And then top right is uncaring with skill, and that leads to manipulation. And then bottom right is caring and skill, which leads to positive esteem and positive relationship. So I want to talk about how to get there by way of caring, right? Because most people come in and say, like, well, give me skills, or like, we've talked about before how sometimes we'll say, we'll word something a certain way, and people will be like, yeah, give me that, right? I want to say it that way, but it's just assumed sometimes that the caring is there, or that the caring is fully developed, or the love is fully developed. But I was curious, as you just think about, maybe let's just start with kind of the idea of why it's important to spend a significant amount of time, like, developing your sense of love or caring for somebody before you even think about, how am I going to talk to them, parent them, be in a relationship with them. Does that make sense?
Yes. It's actually interesting. This is something I like, this topic, because this is something we've talked about many times before, but it sounds more specific, or just maybe a different way of looking at it. But it's kind of a funny, I don't know if it's funny, not funny, haha. Anyway, to think about how often humans are, like, my clients often get mad at me, not even speaking of parents talking to their kids, although I think that happens a lot because parents feel like, I'm desperate now, so give me the thing that's going to stop this thing now, and it's too late for the long game. And I feel like, well, the long game should have been developed all along, so we're going to have to develop that now. But I get it a lot from dudes in their relationships telling, like, well, just tell me what to do. And they get frustrated when I'm saying, I don't know, can you, like, connect to this person, feel what they're feeling, have empathy, and love them, and show love for them? Because I think with I think if we can actually feel that thing, it does. Well, I should say it can influence how we will interact with them. It will change the dynamic we have with them, and I think it changes the understanding of what is needed. Like I think somebody who in the category of all skill but no love, for example, I think you end up with somebody who is was that the was that the manipulation one?
All skill and no, yeah.
Yeah, all skill, no love is manipulation.
Yeah. So in that one,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a factor of, yeah, I need to manipulate this object because it is creating some sort of pain for me. It's
Mm-hmm.
very me focused on, I need to shift this thing. And if we go back to Martin Buber's I thou I it thing, this if I don't love this thing, it's just an object to me. So I needed to shift. As
Mm-hmm.
opposed to if I if I really love this thing as a human, I interact with it differently. I want to understand it. I want to understand all the complexities of it, and that will shift the way I work. So that's maybe a long and rambling way of me starting to say. I think that's why the love part is so important, because do you actually know what you're working with if you don't love it?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have like two different. I mean, it's essentially the same thing as what Rob's just talked about, but it's two like practical examples of it. One of them, I was sitting in a leadership meeting at church, and we have um, early morning, for lack of a better phrase, Bible study classes for our teens, right? And we were talking about this particular meeting, like how do we connect with these teens, and they're not really responding well to this class, and what do we do? And one of the women in the room told a story about, well, when I was doing this, I had a teacher who just took an interest in me and just like would sit and talk to me about volleyball and came to my games. And she goes, it was a huge difference to me. And like I became more invested in the class. And she goes, it completely shifted the trajectory of where I was going. She said, I was like, there's no way I would have finished. She said, but the interest he took in me kind of shifted my trajectory for me, just because I started to, interact differently. And we kind of talked about it a little more, and it was very much they wanted the concrete. Well, but what do we do? And at some point I said, look, the answer is you love the kids, and
Mm-hmm.
they hated that answer because there's nothing concrete about it. Like, well, but what do I
Yeah.
do to do that? And I'm like, oh my, seriously? And so here's the second part, right? Here's the practical application of that. Because as a teacher, when I was teaching, my biggest focus was like, what does my classroom feel like? I didn't like the education was going to happen because it had to happen, but I could control what it felt
Mm-hmm.
like when it happened. And I discovered two things as the year went on, and they became the last probably 6 or 7 years of my teaching career. Um, the principle that kind of guided me through my year. And it was simply to express love as often as I could, particularly when I felt none of it. Now, I taught 10 and 11-year-olds, I taught 9 and 10-year-olds, I taught 8 and 9-year-olds during that 6 and 7 years. And so I dealt with a lot of different kids, and there were lots of days where I just wanted to scream. And most often when I would get that way, I would stop and I'd be like, oh, I love you guys. And it was just doing that shifted immediately how I felt about them. It didn't take
Mm-hmm.
the anger away. I was still angry, but the want to like scream and be like, I'm going to kill you. Nope, that was gone.
Mm-hmm.
It's extremely difficult to express love and continue to feel that level of angry. I think that's what my teaching experience taught me was, one, the fastest way to feel love was to express it. And two, the more I
Mm-hmm.
expressed it, the more I could watch my class shift just in how they interacted with one another and interacted with me. And so that became to
Mm-hmm.
me what I couldn't in that meeting that day verbally express to them was like, look, the kids need to know you love them. Ask them about what they
Mm-hmm.
do. talk, like if you want the checklist, there it is. Ask them about what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And when they want to come up and share something that you think is completely stupid, put a big fat grin on your face and listen to them, because it doesn't matter if you like it or not. They're going to respond to the interest that's being taken, and
Mm-hmm.
it will shift the way you feel about them because it's shifting the kind of interactions that you have. I don't know. That felt
Yeah,
rambly too, but
I don't know where. No, it's good. I don't know where we picked this idea up. And maybe it's because love is probably, you could say, the most valuable and sought after thing on earth.
Mm-hmm.
That we, it's like we kind of put it in, like, is commoditize a word? Maybe we
yeah,
commoditize
it is now.
love, right? And so we kind of develop, yeah. Then we develop this sense of it's earned, right, or deserved, and then it's contingent on behavior. It's contingent
Right.
on action, and so, in this table of quadrants, I'm calling it, I guess, it can be kind of like, well, unless you are, you know, behaving in a certain way or communicating with me in a certain way, um, I'm not going to be able to feel the caring. So it's like we try and behave our way to love instead of treating it as something that is meant to be extended, right? It's not meant to be earned or deserved. And like you said, in some ways, it's most powerful when it's not deserved. If you're looking at it from that lens, it's
Yeah.
most powerful. It's most healing when, when maybe somebody has behaved in ways that are very hard to like, I guess. But when you think about it as an influence or like a healer or something that can connect, something that works, um, it's hard. It's hard to say how to do that. There's not like a set of behaviors or things that you can do. And I think maybe that's why we gravitate towards what is easier. But I guess when I look at these quadrants, I hear a lot of men particularly, um, maybe just like treating it as an assumption that I care about you. We've heard that before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the, women asking men, do you love me? And it's like, well, I wouldn't do X, Y, or Z if I didn't. Right. So it's
Right.
like proving a negative basically. But, but a lot of guys saying, tell me what to do, what to say. And in some ways that can solve the problem temporarily, but that lands you squarely in the manipulation stand or quadrant, right? Where if you give me the words, if I say the right thing, and I don't have to really dig deep and tap into how I actually feel towards you, because maybe I'm afraid you'll reject that, or maybe I'm afraid that I will feel too vulnerable if I do that. So just
Or
give
maybe
me
I don't feel it,
the
but I'm
words to
not
say,
willing
give me the
to.
tasks, right?
Yeah.
Just say that either. Yeah, and if I don't feel it, again, who's that? Who is that on, right?
Yeah.
Is it on you because you've treated me a certain way, or is it on me because I haven't found a way to feel it strongly enough that it can transform me and be a positive influence on our relationship? So I think the quadrants that I see the most are the caring and no skill. So it's assumed that caring isn't there, and it's like this misunderstanding, right? And then there's some clarification that helps, and people start to feel more connected. Or the um, I'm not really thinking about you. I'm trying to think about how I get myself out of this situation. So just tell me what to do to get out of it, right? Which probably is more uncaring than caring. But when you think about it, like maybe as something that we kind of reserve, it's something that I'm not going to allow myself to feel until you earn it. What impact do you think that has on individuals first, and then maybe relationships? Like, I'm not going to allow myself to experience it until you earn it.
Well, one, I think you're cutting yourself off from a positive, powerful force, right? If I'm going to wait for this person to earn it, for me to start expressing it, which is ultimately going to be a big part of what allows me to feel it, um, then I'm just cutting myself off, like for no reason other than, I don't know, stubbornness. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's to me that the minute you enter into that kind of you have to earn it, it very much becomes this idea of I'm going to look, and if you're not hitting it just right, then you don't qualify yet. Well, the problem is right there, I'm looking for negatives in the relationship. I'm looking for how they're not meeting my expectation. I'm not looking for how they are, I'm looking for how they're not meeting it, because I have to quantify it. And that's problematic because it shifts my focus from, hey, let's build this thing, to how's this not working? And then the relationship, to me, it's, and with kids and parents, I think you see it a lot, right? It's that pressure to perform, where if I don't do it just right, mom and dad aren't going to accept me. Or here's this aspect of myself that I really want to share with mom and dad, but they won't accept it, because the belief is their love is conditional. They're only going to love me if I perform a certain way. And if I don't, then they're not gonna be there for me. And it just creates an unhealthy dynamic where, like, that's most often when I start seeing kids act out and stuff like that. It's that they're trying to, like, well, I can't win anyway, so I'm just gonna do whatever because I can't win.
It's interesting. I think my brain went into a rabbit hole when you asked that question of like, that's interesting. When you say, how do I won't feel this love until you earn it. I thought first either A, that person is lying, like I feel it, but I won't express it to you until you've earned it. Or if they're saying, I literally cannot feel it until you, I guess, prove to me it's worth it to feel it. Either way, I think somewhere in this, the problem to me is it's a massive amount of insecurity. I won't show you this, or I won't feel this until I have basically a guarantee that what I'm showing or feeling or expressing will be rewarded. And if it's with kids, it's like, well, actually either one, but if it's with kids, it's rewarded in the way that you respond to what I say, which validates me as a parent, I guess, and also eases my anxiety that would come from you becoming an idiot. If it's an adult, if it's like your partner, your spouse, it's a similar thing in my head that's like, I won't express this until you give me what I'm looking for, because I'm so insecure. I can't stand on my own 2 feet to just say, I love you, even if you don't love me back, or even if you're not doing the things I think you need to do. It also means I've translated, because of my insecurity, I have translated what love is into actionable items that you must perform for me. So I think I don't even know if that answers your question anymore, but I think it's a weird space of like, I have an insecurity that you need to do something about before I'm willing to just be open to what Mike's talking about, this powerful force that would shape me, because I don't know what the outcome will be. So I'm not going to do it until I have a guarantee that this will work for me.
Well, it's interesting. Like, I find that when we started talking about this, and it probably, my background in education is part of what takes my mind there. I tend to think of the parent-child dynamic more often, because that's where I've spent, again, so much of my time. But like, listening to Rob, I thought, yeah, I remember dating Jenner, and even like, I think there are 2 other girls that I told I loved, in a romantic way, and I never wanted to be the first one to say it. Like, I remember that distinctly with, for sure, Jenner and the woman I dated prior to her, where I didn't want to be the first one to say it, not without some kind of guarantee that it was coming back. That was terrifying to me. And so now the difference there is I wasn't withholding expressions of love, but I was withholding that specific one, because of that insecurity. So I think there is something to be said for that insecurity of like, no, I don't know how this is going to end for me, and until I have some kind of guarantee, I don't want to risk it. So I'm going to hold, and essentially you're keeping a part of yourself back from the other person. You're saying, look, there's this part of me that I'm not going to open up. And again, that's a huge detriment to the relationship when you're holding part of yourself back.
Yeah. When you, I don't know if there's an easy way out of this, but the way you're describing it is like I have to be validated in my own feelings for you.
Right.
So if I express love to you, I need you to receive it and reciprocate it. Otherwise, I can't hold on to it anymore. I'll flee from it, right?
Right.
So what do you think? Maybe think about this while I'm sharing this next part. Like, think about the impact of somebody who is able to sustain that feeling, even as it's not being received or reciprocated, and maybe is doing it more because it's what they want to feel, right? Like I feel more whole and I feel more like the person I'm trying to be when I'm in a way kind of possessed with love despite what's going on around you, right? So I think one of the if we're talking about skills for a second, I think one of the skills that that I enjoy the most in my communication in situations like this, and that I try to help my clients lean into more, is when you're being blocked by your partner, or your partner's being defensive or distant or things like that. It's like a persuasive way to communicate where you're fully immersed in that feeling of, love and wanting to give and wanting to receive. And you can say to the other person essentially like, knock it off. I'm trying to connect with you, right? Why aren't you letting me in? Why are you pushing me away? Right? Um, I'm not going to crumble if you keep doing it, but I'm also not going to stay here indefinitely if you don't want it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to knock at least 3 times and say, will you let me in? Right? Like, this is where I'm coming from. And I guess when you think about the influence of somebody who can do that, um, like what capacity does that person have to transform themselves and relationships?
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I was going to say, one, I think that person, if they can do that and truly do that, they've already undergone a pretty significant transformation. That is a hard thing to do. To love without reciprocation, not to love unconditionally, but to love without reciprocation. It is exhausting. Because, and this is, it feels so cliche to say it. Sorry, but like I believe that there is love, or there is strength and power in love. And so I know, shut it, dude. Shut it.
That's the next Manspace t-shirt, dude.
I wanted to just quote Huey Lewis.
The power of love.
Power
Curious
of
thing.
love.
Make one man weep, make another man sing. But it's when, like, I think we can draw significant strength when we express it for others. But there is a strength that comes in having it expressed towards us. And so if we're not having that, that's hard. Certainly, I think it's hard to want to continue to put energy into a relationship like that. And the only one that I can think where we really do that is parent-child. I think any other relationship, if we don't get some kind of something back, at some point we're just going to say, okay, clearly this is not something they want. And so I'm going to stop pouring myself into this relationship that is not going to ever go anywhere. Kids, that's a different story, because we will pour ourselves into that relationship over and over and over again, even when the kid makes extremely clear, I want nothing to do with you. Okay, well, too bad. I'm always here. And so I'm going to keep pouring into this relationship and get little back from it. But I think you move outside of that relationship, and I don't know. Like, I think if Jenner were to say, "Hey, I'm done, and I don't want what you're giving anymore," I would try for a while, but at some point, I would stop. Mostly because she's saying, "Stop."
Yeah, and I want to be clear here too. What I'm not saying is continue to pour into a relationship where somebody doesn't want to receive it because you can't handle them not reciprocating, so you keep like giving so that they will, right? I'm talking more like, if I feel like if you receive from me my feelings of love are amplified, but if you don't, my feelings of love aren't diminished. Like I can walk away full,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. And I hear what you're saying. That's like a tall order.
Well, and Matt, you're asking what capacity does that kind of person have to change things?
Yeah, like what's the impact of somebody like that? I think we all have people in our lives that do that to some degree, right?
Yeah.
Or we've experienced it, and like
Yeah.
what impact does that have?
So if I took in my mind, to answer that question, if I took Mike's example of if Jenner came and said, I'm done, I mean, there's a possibility in that hypothetical scenario that Jenner's like, I just woke up one day and realized I don't like you anymore, so I'm out. Right.
Right.
But otherwise, what we're talking about is saying there is, like, I would wonder, okay, why is she done? Does she feel a pressure from Mike? Does she feel like Mike doesn't love her, doesn't accept her, doesn't? So I work with lots of people where we'll talk about, um, you, I know you love this person, but you're also making all these requests and demands. And have you ever just been able to love the person for who they are? And I think
Mm-hmm.
part of what you're talking about, Matt, is like, look, if I could reach a point, if Jenner says this to Mike and Mike says, oh, I could see how I have loved you conditionally and I've put these things on you, but I'm learning now to not let my love diminish regardless of how you respond. I can still put this same love out there. I think the loved object or the loved person then can start to feel a whole different kind of feeling of, like, when I'm around somebody, a whole different kind of feeling of this person loves me, which makes
Mm-hmm.
me feel valid, accepted, wanted, which changes the way I then interact with other people because it builds my confidence. So I have at least a couple of friends. There's one in particular I'm thinking of where every time I'm around that guy, every time I talk to him, it feels like he has the most genuine interest in me. And it never feels like he's, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? It never feels like he is manipulating me. It doesn't feel like he is trying to like schmooze me. It just feels like that guy really loves me.
Mm-hmm.
And always I end up like, I feel like, dude, I can go tell any joke I want right now. I'm the funniest person on the planet because this guy, when he talks to me, every joke I tell, he laughs so hard at it. It feels like, oh, I'm the best.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I think that has enormous capacity, even without saying, that person may never ask me, will you please change this, this, and this? They may just interact with me in a way that makes me feel like $1,000,000 because I can feel that undiminished love coming towards me. Then I feel like I feel better, and it changes the way I actually, for me, with this person, I'm thinking it makes me love them more back in the same way. Like, I think, well, you tell me, you talk. Let me show you some of this love because
Mm-hmm.
I feel more stable in myself. So to me, I think that's, if you said, what's the capacity to change? If I felt that, I think, man, that is so significant that if I felt like, to me, that deep love that's undiminished, it makes me feel like at my core, who I am as a person, regardless of the stupid stuff I do, I am still loved. Then it feels like, man, this is such an emotional security base to leap off of that I can go do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it's funny
Yeah,
because,
what you said at the end, I wonder too. Like, go ahead.
well, I was
I
just
think
going to
there's a
say, like,
delay.
there is apparently a little bit. I think, like, I agree totally with what Rob said. Um, and that's exactly like I've often said, if you want to change someone's behavior, love them. That's the fastest way to change someone's behavior, is just figure out how to love them no matter what behavior they're showing you, right? Like, I love you no matter what. They'll eventually experience this thing Rob has talked about where they want to be better because they appreciate so much what they're feeling from you. Well, now I forgot the second half of that point. So go ahead, Matt.
Well, let me say this really
Oh,
quick on that. I think it's not just because they can feel the appreciation. I think it's also because I think when I feel loved, uh, undiminished,ly, that's a word, right? Then I also feel like it helps me think. It helps me feel like I can love myself. If that makes sense, it feels like,
mm-hmm.
wow, you see something that maybe I don't see. So it's not just that I feel appreciated, like, okay, yeah, but it changes the way I perceive and love myself. I think that's pretty massive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would guess that, like, when you're talking about your friend, like, it's not like you you kind of like consciously think, huh, he just did a huge thing for me, so I should repay him with my love. It just like, it just naturally happens, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You just feel an extension of, it's almost like what was already in you just comes out.
Right.
Whereas before it's contained because you're unsure if the other person views you in the way you're describing. So when I have that experience where you accept me, and you use some words that I think are important, because I do think there are, I guess they ultimately boil down to behaviors, right? But maybe some attributes that stand out when we think of love, like it's genuine interest, curiosity, like drawing close to, and when you feel that from somebody, or when you feel that for somebody, um, then then I think that's kind of the experience that we oftentimes call love in some way, right? But
Right.
so it just kind of like opens you up, and then what was already there comes out towards the other person. And what we talked about at the beginning, like if I'm saying, um, essentially, I can't feel this for you because you're doing X, Y, or Z, right? Um, I don't think what you're saying is like, I've lost that loving feeling or like that it's gone, right? It's just, I have put some barriers on myself that don't allow me to go there emotionally because of maybe some of these rules we've created, where it's like, that's a really valuable commodity and you should only give it to people who deserve it or who earn it, or, and
Mm-hmm.
that's how you shape people, is you restrict it. But what we're saying is, no, when you like douse people in it, not that you're doing it well, if you do it with the intent to manipulate them, it doesn't really work, right? But like if you're
Right.
just dousing people in it, uh more often than not, way more often than not, what happens is, the very interaction you're wanting to have with that person just emerges, right? So but if I'm restricting it, then I'm robbing myself of the feeling, and I'm putting you in a situation where you're guessing at how to unlock the key, or how to unlock this thing inside of me, right? That you really maybe didn't even know you wanted until I restricted it from you, right? Um, but I think way more often than not, that's kind of where relationship issues, that's where we start talking about them, right? Like, um, I've said this before, I don't hate the love languages. But again, if you really think about what the core message is there, it's, I'm really interested in and curious about, and, you know, have the capacity to love the idea that for you, physical touch does something transformative for you.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm in that space, I'm way more likely to move in that direction. But if it's like, well, if I give you that, then maybe you'll do some acts of service for me, right? And since I've told you what mine is, that's as vulnerable as I'm going to get with you, is to tell you, hey, this one's important to me. And then I just anticipate and expect that you will do it. And if you don't, that means you don't possess love for me. That's where I feel like it always ends up.
Yeah, that's interesting. It, to think about the idea, like, because when you talked about dousing somebody with love, and if I went back to the parenting thing, I think sometimes parents will think all we're saying is just love, no matter what they do, just love. And
Mm-hmm.
it feels like, I mean, not necessarily. I can still say, hey, you can't punch your sister,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
but also I think that's why that quadrant thing is good, because there's an element of like, yeah, love and skill.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of the skill thing, especially when it comes to like adult relationships, romantic relationships, the skill is it's a communication skill in a couple ways to me in my mind. One is being able to say, here's a request I have, and a willingness and ability to be vulnerable and kind of put the thing out there, like what you're saying. You can't just say, well, I like acts of service, so where is it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It is saying, well, let me lean into the things that show you love, because one of the ways that I'm going to kind of lovingly shape you as you lovingly shape me is because I know this matters to you, I will engage in it. And I'm trying to communicate back to you, that's how these relationships work. If you know this matters to me, will you engage in this? In addition to me asking for it. When it comes to kids, I think that's actually probably a more profound impact than telling them do this, this, and this, than it is to say, I love you. I douse you in it. You can feel it, and we are connected. And then you see who I am as a person. And so it shapes the way you understand relationships and the give and take and who you can become as a human. That's more profound than telling them, do this, this, and this. It's why we have those stupid phrases, not stupid, but phrases like actions speak louder than words. But I think inside the adult relationships, the same thing happens. It's not my job to educate my partner, but it is my job to kind of work with my partner to say, well, this is how this feels good to me. How does it feel good to you? Back and forth. And so I model it while I also ask for it. And then I douse with love.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and we've talked about this before, particularly in regards to children, right? This idea of, because to me, a lot of what you're talking about, Rob, comes back to the idea of vulnerability. It's a willingness to open myself up, because if I'm really going to open and do this douse in love that we're talking about, again, I have to open myself for that. I can't do it sincerely and stay closed off. It won't work. It will feel wholly insincere, and it's not going to do the thing that you want it to. Which, again, if you're doing it because you're trying to accomplish an outcome, you've already missed it. But the more that I open myself up, the more vulnerable I am, the more I'm allowing myself to be seen by my child or by my partner. That has an impact. That says, hey, here's this, like, I'm trusting you with this thing. That's going to make them more willing to say, yeah, okay, I can do that too. We talked a long time ago, and I think I've said this in the last couple of weeks, but your influence with your kids decreases as they get older, right? 0 by 20%. And I think, sure, if you have no relationship with your kid, that's true. But the kind of thing we're talking about, no, you'll maintain influence much longer, because the relationship is a different relationship. It's not the parent. I mean, it is a parent-child relationship, but it's not. It's different. And it does come back, right? Like, this all started, Matt, with you saying everyone always wanted to get to the structure of it. Like, how do we do the, and I think, right, it doesn't mean you love no matter what. There are still boundaries that get put in place. There are still, like, don't hit your sister. No, you can't go and skip class and have it be okay. It's not going to be okay. It's going to be a problem. It doesn't mean I love you less. It means you did a dumb thing.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why we go towards the skills and the structure and getting each other to behave in ways that are comfortable for us is that we think that that's where we find peace. But there's an anxiety in comfort, because you know the weakness that comfort is producing in you. So I think that as much as, like,
It's deep.
Peace from kids being quiet or your spouse speaking in your love language is important. I think what you're experiencing right alongside that calm and peace is an anxiety and a hypervigilance for when it's going to end, right? And will I be able to handle it when it does? Will I be able to exert control over them the way that I did to get to this point, right? So it's like, it's always there. And I would argue that there's actually more peace in love, like leaning into the full experience of love, especially in situations where you might be telling yourself they don't deserve this from me or whatever, right? Because you're risking in that moment, and you're finding your strength and your capacity to experience an emotion that, again, I think I would argue is probably more highly sought after than peace. But I think peace comes through knowing I have the capacity to feel love, kind of unrestrained love. It doesn't mean love and I will allow you to abuse me, or I will allow you to, but this is the tricky part about forgiveness and love and stuff like that, right? I've worked with some people where it's like, probably more conventional psychology types of advice or interventions would say you need to have boundaries with this person, right? You need to protect yourself from this person. And I think I want to be really careful here because I'm not talking about obvious situations where that is definitely the answer. But I think there are situations where you find more strength in feeling love and compassion than you do in having kind of boundaries and protection. Not because the other person's behavior is less damaging or anything like that, but it's like you have made yourself so much more resilient to it because it's not infecting you anymore. When you're in kind of a boundaried place, you might be protected, but you still possess the fear that they can infect you.
Mm-hmm.
But love is kind of like, you can't change the way I feel, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're getting at this idea that really, I do think love and peace are very intricately tied together. But I also feel like one of the reasons why we feel more peace when we love is because it is something in our control. Like the anxiety that comes in waiting for somebody else to behave a certain way or love a certain way, or if I'm boundaried or whatever it is, and they could still get it and infect me. It's like I can't control that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes me feel unsettled because I can't change it. I can't. That's what's so frustrating about when you're working with kids. There is a much bigger degree of influence than when you're working with a spouse. I've had plenty of spouses in my office saying, "Why is he doing this?" or "Why is she doing this, this, and this?" It's like, well, they are, you know. What do you,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll ask like, "What? How do I like suggest to them or tell them this?" I'm like, you can tell them that. It doesn't mean it's going to change any behavior. And that's so frustrating because it feels out of our control, which then feels like our happiness and peace are out of our control. But it's the
Mm-hmm.
same idea as gratitude. If I can walk around all day and see the things that I am grateful for, it shapes the way I think. And there's always other things I can find. And then suddenly I don't feel so bogged down by this negative thing of always trying to escape pain.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm loving, um, what was the word we're using? Whatever. If I'm showing lots of love, then
Dousing.
dousing, that wasn't the word I was thinking of, but undiminishingly, I think was the word I was thinking for. But if I'm loving that way, then that's in my control. I can keep loving you. I can find more things I love about you. I can stay curious about you. And that feels peaceful to me. And that feels like, oh, I know what to do there. But if it's saying, I will love you when you stop behaving like that, or when you give me what I'm looking for, I can't control that. So how am I ever
Mm-hmm.
supposed to find peace? So it's just really powerful to think. I don't think I've thought about it quite this way, Matt, the way you're saying, but I think, yeah, that way that love and peace are so tied together. The more we love, I think the more peace we feel. Partly because
Mm-hmm.
it feels like, okay, I can shape this.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's something to be said for that. Like the thing that I kept hearing is one of them is a very internal confidence. Like again, like if I love, that's in my control. If I'm responding to someone else's love, I can't control how much or how they show love to me or how much love they show or any of that. And so if I'm basing my peace on that, then yeah, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty there. But if it's based on my ability and my capacity to show love, no, that's pretty much entirely within my control. And so there is a piece that comes in that, right? It's a much more internal, to me, it's like we're kind of hitting on differentiation. It's that ability to know this is me regardless of what's happening around me. And that's the strength of an individual, is that ability to say, no, this is who I am regardless.
Mm-hmm. So
Deep thoughts.
we're hitting that time, but let's do some takeaways. So one thing that I think is really important is, if I'm not feeling love for somebody, particularly somebody that I'm close to, a kid, a spouse, a partner, whatever, parent, what, like, asking yourself, what is preventing me from feeling that right now? And your first answers will probably be like, well, because they're doing this, this, and this, right? Okay, well, still, what is it about that keeps you from feeling love, right? Well, it's annoying, or it's okay. So why? Just keep coming back to yourself. Like, what is it? This is about you, right? Because maybe that person is just being themselves, themselves, not multiple people. But when you dig deeper there, right? Then I think you can get to a place where you can start tapping into, like, what is missing for me to be able to feel it, not so much what's getting in the way. And sometimes it's, I don't have enough information. Like I don't really know what makes that person tick. So I'm having a hard time knowing what I'm caring about, right? So if I know, that person's acting annoying because in situations like this, they feel really nervous, right? Because, and that might lead to you asking questions like, hey, how are you doing? Right. Like what, and who knows if that person will open up to you, but I think over time you can start to develop a sense of like, oh, that's the thing they struggle with. They feel really anxious in social situations. So they start to like pick on people or something. Right. So when they do that, it means they're hurting, right? They're struggling. And I care about the fact that they're having a hard time. So I can kind of like sidestep in a way my own problems with the behavior and tap into something deeper that allows me to experience maybe more interest, maybe more compassion, maybe more love. I'm, and when I feel that way, how does that influence a situation? One, maybe I feel more peace, right? Maybe I'm not as bothered. And if I start communicating with that person from that place, what happens? Do they receive it like you're saying, Rob? Like, do they feel like, oh, even when I'm like this person's like, really interested in me and talking to me, and my behavior starts to shift, right? I start to settle down. I'm not as anxious, and then maybe I start doing something different. But I think we're so quick to just stop at, again, let me just control the behavior to give myself a false sense of peace, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm just constantly watching for it to happen again. I'm not recognizing any efforts in that person to behave differently. I'm just looking for, well, there it is again, and then there's no way you can feel anything positive towards somebody from that mindset, right? So that'd be my takeaway.
I think mine starts with actually mine. The idea of mine is what you're saying, Matt, that the more love we feel, the more we allow ourselves to feel it and express it unconditionally, the more peaceful we feel. I think in order to do that, the first step actually is something that people roll their eyes at when I mentioned earlier is practice gratitude daily and then eventually kind of constantly, which people roll their eyes at, which always makes me laugh because I will say, I'm not good at this, first of all, by the way, but I will say, this is based in science. This isn't something like we're saying because it's frou-frou. It's kind of like saying, yeah, I get it. The earth is round. It's like, well, it is. I mean, you can say it's not, but it is. This
You
works.
just offended our flat earthers.
It's at least half of our listeners. So I think if you can start to practice that, I don't have like, I do think ask yourself these questions. Why, have I prescribed how you will love me and how I will love you back? Meaning it should look like this. These things must happen first in order for this to happen. Because if you're asking yourself that, that's an internal problem of you saying, I've got an insecurity or I've got something I need to examine. Instead of saying, I'm going to let that go and just try loving, because that actually brings more peace because more is in your control and in your power. And I think then you're going to feel much more, you might say, maneuverability, even maximum maneuverability to have the things you want. And also, after Mike gives his takeaway, I do have an announcement for our spacemen. But go ahead, Mike.
Does it start with a Y and end with YouTube?
No. Why YouTube?
No, my takeaway was that, like, if you're not feeling love in the way you want to for someone, start expressing it more often. The answer is not to pull away from it, it's to lean into it. And I've run into some people who say, well, but if I don't feel it, I don't want to say it. And to that, I would say, okay, then do what Rob is saying, practice gratitude. Find things about that person that you can appreciate. The more you can do it, the more you'll start to feel love for them. But the other thing I would say is, if you want to feel like, but I don't, so the argument is, well, I don't feel it for them, so I don't want to say it. Well, but do you want to feel it for them? Well, yeah. Okay, then say it. Like, you want to, in the moment, that's enough. You want to feel love for them. Okay, so express it. You're not lying in it. You're in a relationship where you have felt love for them before. you want to feel that same level of love again, which is the key. Like, I'm going to argue first, if you're sitting here saying, well, I'm not sure I love them, there's probably a couple things that are bothering you that you're like, I don't love that. You could still probably find things you love about that person. So there is still some love there. So you're not lying when you say, hey, I love you. But to me, I think, no, the fastest way to feel it is to express it verbally in particular, which admittedly with students, there wasn't, like, as a male teacher, I didn't hug my kids like ever. And so verbal was really my only kind of recourse, verbal and high fives. I give a lot of high fives, but that was really kind of the two ways that I could express it. But again, if you want to feel it, express it. That's my takeaway. If you want to feel it, express it, and you'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
Rob. Well, there it is, Spaceman. The announcement is as of today, August 9th. I'll put that in quotes, and only YouTubers will see it. As of today, August 9th. Stupid microphone, stop it! We are now on YouTube. This time for realsies. Because apparently in a previous episode, we said we were going to be.
Yeah, I think we said we were going to be this week.
We had our banner art and icon up there.
Yeah. Well, multiple people reached out to me like, I'm looking for your YouTube. I can't find it. I was like, oops. So this time for realsies, August 9th, we're on YouTube. So find us at the Manspace. But keep in mind, Manspace is one word.
There's no space in Manspace.
There's no space in Manspace.
Well, and you have to have the.
That's true. But I say that because if you don't see our faces, either our little thumbnail picture thing, it has our faces. So you'll know it's us. We're not named Les and Russ. Is it Les and Russ?
Yeah.
The other Manspace.
It has the black and red logo, right? Like that's the other thing they can find.
What Matt put in, but yeah. Mm-hmm. So go find us on YouTube because it will validate us in our children's eyes. It will finally matter. So in that case, come back next time to YouTube and see us on YouTube because there's a lot to look at here.
And now you'll finally know that Matt really is uncommonly attractive.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for that. So catch us next time on the Manspace. Does it start with a Y and end in an YouTube? We hope you enjoyed the episode. Please remember to
rate
and
review.
Please, we desperately need it.